We've been learning every week about how to walk with God. And right now, we're looking at how do we make decisions? And in particular, decisions which we didn't want to make, decisions which we didn't see coming. You just got forced into it. And in order to go through that and answer it according to the owner's manual here, Jesus said if we follow his teaching, he will give us the abundant life, or life worth living, or life that we love, a life that you love, I suppose is a way of saying abundant life. But how do we equip ourselves to make decisions properly? And where we are today, we got here through a series of decisions. We on the thing we handed out last week, something like 35,000 choices a day we make. And we are as healthy as we decided to be. We have our financial position is as a result of decisions we've made. Our relationships are where they are because of decisions, for the main part, decisions we've made. We are where we are because of the decisions we made got us exactly right here. Now, going forward, how do we make decisions which improve the quality of life until we experience everything that Jesus Christ has promised us? And we're looking at a series of 4 questions which will help us with all decisions, but in particular, these 4 questions help in these surprise decisions that we weren't really ready to make, or didn't want to make, or don't want to make. I think sometimes we're putting our kids through school or something, and finances change, and now we got to make a decision. Do I withdraw my support? Can I continue? What do? I don't want to make this decision. Or grandparents are helping their kids raise their grandkids, and we're making decisions all the time. And here's the interesting part of it. Even these decisions we didn't want to make, even these decisions that caught us off guard, even these decisions that we weren't ready to make, when we look back over our life, that decision changed the trajectory of our life. In other words, sometimes we say, thank goodness I made that decision. Or sometimes we want to go back and make that one again. That wasn't a good one. So these decisions can have a big influence on the direction of our life. So let's keep looking at those 4 questions, and then we're going to look at an example of someone who made excellent decisions in difficult circumstances. So here we are. Now on your bulletin insert are the question we did last week, which is, am I being completely honest with myself? And we said that we lie to ourselves statistically. This is true. You can graph it out, so it has to be true. We lie to ourselves more than we lie to anybody else. And we said, if you want to see your full potential in self-deception, what you do is you put a piece of cherry cheesecake on the table on the same day you're supposed to go work out. And your mind will tell you why you should sit down and eat the cheesecake instead of going to work out. So am I being completely honest on what I'm about to do and why I'm doing it? And we do many things. Sometimes we're just angry. And we use the example of, I'm going to apologize to her, tell her how she hurt me and she was really stupid and all that stuff, and then I'm going to say, I forgive you. You're not there for forgiveness. You're there to blow off anger. And so what's going on in my heart, and we talked about from crucial conversations that our leadership goes through, you always start with your heart. Why am I doing this? And why am I doing this way? You always start with your own honesty and your own motivation. So, and this week our question is, what story do you want to tell? Now, as we look back over our life, we can sum up our story. Now, you know the rules are that the older you get, the better you were. So we won more football games. We ran faster. The times get down. So, but in our life story, here's the thought, and this is what you have to keep in mind. If I were to say, tell me about your high school years, you spent anywhere from 4 to 7 years there. And if I were to say, what was it like? You say, yeah, I took this, and this. I went to that high school, and I had 3 friends. You reduce 4 years into about 4 or 5 minutes. Are you with me? That's kind of your story. Did this, did that. Or tell me about college, or tell me about after college. We reduce the events of our life into a shortened version that we would call our story. And you ask someone about, what was the movie like? And they'll take a 90-minute movie and condense it down to 2 minutes. So your story is the way that you summarize your life. Here's the truth. It doesn't matter how bad the crisis you're facing right now is. It doesn't matter how traumatic and how bad it could turn out. It doesn't matter how good or bad it does turn out. Within a very short period of time, it will become part of your story. So we have to keep things in perspective as we make these decisions, because we control the direction and the outcome of our story. And our story has to be consistent with the teachings that we have and with the integrity and character that we possess. Now, having that thing that at some point all the events of life are just going to be part of our story, if we hold that in suspension, knowing that that is what's going to happen, our story can go like, you remember the recession of 2008, 2009? In this church, because a lot of people buying houses and stuff like that. And if you got caught with the wrong number of houses Thursday afternoon when they shut the whole system down, a lot of people lost a lot of things here, jobs, vehicles, houses. Now you get to choose what your story is. Because your story can be, 2009 I lost my job and it really upset me, and I got semi-depressed, and I withdrew from my friends and maybe drank a little too much, and the kids kind of hid from me, and my wife finally got sick of my attitude and left, and that's my story. Or your story could be, in 2009, I did lose my job. It did get tough, but my wife and I got together and we said, God's in charge. We're going to trust Him. We're going to make it through this. And on the other side of it, we will pick life back up. And our marriage strengthened during that. Our kids learned a life lesson. And when I finally did get work and come back together, our nuclear family was stronger than it has ever been. You choose the story by the decisions that you make. And we also said, for those of us who follow Christ, and we plan according to Financial Peace University, that recession was the best time for people who were following the biblical model to buy houses at a 50 to 60% discount. Say amen. If you'd have bought 5 rental houses back there and sold them this last year, you cannot, sell them now, my strategy is buy high, sell low. But the Rothschilds, actually, they were talking to him, you need to learn to help people. And he says, I do help people. I think of things that people would buy, and they'll buy it at any price, so I sell it to them. Then I look, and somebody wants to sell something at any price, so I buy it from them. So I help people all the time. Work on it, it'll come to you. But the disciplined approach of a follower of Christ avoids the pain of using the financial system set up by the prince of the power of the air, which dominates this financial system. If you use this financial system, you will be in as much pain as everybody else. So the decision that we make is to educate ourselves on what does the Bible say about finances, and then to follow that through so that we do not experience the pain that the rest of culture. God wants his children to be living a life that you can love, enjoy, and Jesus called the abundant life. So the decisions that we make, first of all, it tells us how many hardships we're going to have, and also it tells us how our story will be good or not so good. All right. Now, this is how we need to think of it before we look at the illustration and we look at Joseph and his decision-making process from the Old Testament. So, when you get to your story, the objective is to live a story of high integrity so that if you're talking to your kids later or friends or whatever, you can tell the whole story. And you don't have to leave certain parts out. You tracking with me? Your whole story was high integrity. And so the decision-making process that we as followers of Christ go through will allow your story to be full, vivid, and in order to not have to hide parts of it, because we really didn't make good decisions. But from this point on, here's how they need to go. Let's look at an illustration, and we're looking at Joseph. Most of you know his story. It happens about 1850 BC, so 1,800 years and 2,000. We're looking at almost 4,000 years of history have gone by since then, but he was exemplary in his example of high integrity decision making. And he could tell his story, and he told it several times. He had to tell it in front of Potiphar, he had to tell it in front of the Pharaoh, he had to tell it several times, his story. And his story was one of those ones that we aspire to be able to tell. So what was his story? I'll just go through it quick. Jacob had 12 boys, and 2 of them were younger. And Jacob and Joseph was the firstborn of the wife that he loved more. The wife that he loved more. Yeah, how's that work? I'm going to keep moving here. And he showed great favoritism to him, and he treated him better than the rest of the family. And the story of the coat that he gave him, a beautiful coat of honor. And so as a result, the other brothers resented Joseph and the kid born with a silver spoon in his mouth. And one day, Jacob sent his son Joseph way out miles away, because the other 10 older brothers were keeping his sheep and his goats and all that stuff. He was a fairly wealthy man, and he sent Joseph to see how they're making out. Well, Joseph finds them, and as he's coming up the road, they're having this discussion. What are we going to do with that rat? I'm so sick of him. I think we should just kill him. And someone else says, kill him? Why waste all that? Why don't we just throw him in a well, wait for some passer slave traders, and we'll sell him, and we'll get some money out of his worthless hide. Just kill him, get it over with. And so they're sitting there discussing what they're going to do with this spoiled rat coming down the road. And in the end, they threw him in a well, sold him into slavery. So now he's in slavery. He gets bought by a guy named Potiphar. And he starts out humble jobs. By the time it's done, he has worked his way through all of the slavery up until he is the man in charge of everything to do with Potiphar, and Potiphar doesn't even know or care what's going on because he is a trusted servant in Joseph. Here's the deal. Now, I don't know about you, But if you were to sell me into slavery, I'm pretty sure that would tick me off. I'm pretty sure I'd have an attitude issue. Just a tad. But Joseph decided that God was in charge, and he was going to be faithful to his God and not waver regardless of the circumstances. And so his decisions were based on the fact that God was in charge, and he operated his life with high integrity. And in every situation you find him, he rose to the top because he was living a life that God could bless. His attitude was not based on his circumstances. And in studies of happiness, by the way, which we have a constitutional right to, apparently, happiness is only 10% dependent on your circumstances. We fight the circumstances of our life with the firm belief that I can change my circumstances, I can change my happiness. That turns out to not be true. Happiness is not based on the circumstances, but it's based on how you act to them. What's that saying? Life is 10% circumstances and 90% how you react to it. As a follower of Jesus Christ, we have a specific way in which we view life, which helps us from becoming bitter and keeps us from continually getting, and helps us continually get better. And Joseph did not develop that attitude of bitterness, but rather he just stayed sweet in his spirit and close to God, regardless of the circumstances. So what's the lesson for us? The little mini lesson is, when we trust God, he can work in our life. And regardless of the circumstances, and there was a lot of people here who lost a lot of things in 2008, 2009, but their faith stood solid. Circumstances don't determine your happiness, don't determine your faith. Joseph is teaching us that the way we react to them is what changes our life for the better or for the worst. And so Joseph comes in there. He's in Potiphar's house. He's numero uno. He's Mr. Big. And Potiphar was the head of the personal guard to the Pharaoh. So he was right up there. And it was one little problem. Things are going well. He's esteemed. He's got a great job. Potiphar's wife had the hots for him, which was a problem. And she put him in a no-win scenario. What's the no-win scenario? If you sleep with her, eventually they're just going to kill you. If you don't sleep with her, she's going to set you up and they're just going to kill you. So he was, have you ever been in a no-win? It doesn't matter whether you do this or you do that, you can't win. How do you respond? Joseph responded by continuing every day to do the right thing and to stay on course, keep his spirit sweet, and stay connected to God. No-win scenarios don't change anything. We have a way that operates, which is the same in good, in bad, and in no-win. And so in the story, as they relate it to us, Potiphar left everything he had in Joseph's care. I'm reading verse 6 on your thing. With Joseph in charge, he didn't concern himself about anything except the food that he ate. Now, Joseph was well-built, much like myself, and he was very handsome and good-looking, and he had this problem all the time where the master's wife took notice of Joseph and said, "Come to bed with me." Now, Malchias, that's good-looking, guys. We understand this, and we have to guard against this all the time. Not. So, she wanted him physically, and he can't do that. Why? Because it's not an integrity life. It's not a high integrity life. It's a sleazy life. And he doesn't want that to be part of his story. So he's sitting down there talking some to his kids, and he says, "Yeah, life is good. A little rough when I slept with Potiphar's wife. You don't want those things in your story. Your story has to be consistent, high integrity." And so he would not do something that would tarnish his story. And as a result, one day she finally just said, he raped me. This Hebrew guy you brought in here, you put him over all your house, now he's trying to get me. Well, the truth is, I'm pretty sure that Potiphar knew that wasn't true. How do I know that? Because Potiphar was one of the more powerful men in the Egyptian kingdom, which at that time was one of the more powerful kingdoms in the world. And if a guy's messing with your wife, you just kill them. You tracking with me? These guys got used to unquestionable power. But the fact that he didn't, he just said, well, throw him in jail, means that I don't think this was his first run-in with his wife and servants trying to come onto her. So it was a good thing that Joseph took the high road, because even Potiphar knew, in spite of the accusations, that his servant Joseph didn't do that. Are you with me? Otherwise, he just killed him. So Joseph goes to jail. Now, I don't know about you, but once again, you stick me in one of those jails, and I can't help it. I develop an attitude. You know, you're down there and you have to use this corner as your latrine. It hasn't been cleaned out in 30 years. You're talking to God and you're saying, you know, you could come here and rescue me. Do you see the mess I'm in? And he's talking to God, and he could get angry, he could get upset, he could do whatever he wants, but he doesn't. What does he do? He does the same thing, he does the right thing. And he is once again the best prisoner he can be. So he's the best slave he can be. Now he's the best prisoner he can be. Why? Because his integrity demands that if his story of his life is going to be consistent, he does the right thing at each turn. And so finally, he's a model prisoner, and he actually gets some freedom in there. And what happens, the Lord begins to work in his life. And he is able to interpret dreams, and two of the prisoners have dreams, and he interprets them. And he says, listen, guys, when you get out of here, remember old Job, because they went to Pharaoh's service. And he says, when you get in the presence of Pharaoh, get a job for me and get me out of here. This place stinks. And so, fine, Joe, thanks for interpreting. Yep, I'll didn't remember him at all. Joe who? 2 years later, the Lord is, come on, instant coffee world. We're 12, 13 years into this now. I don't know about you, but I don't always wait for the full pot of coffee to be made. I sometimes pull it out and stick another one in because it's going to take another 3-4 minutes. This guy's ticking off decades here. And he's still making every decision honoring God and with high integrity. And I don't see anywhere his attitude starts to stink. He's the best prisoner he can be. The Lord works it out. Finally, he gets called into Pharaoh's house, interprets the dream, and becomes second in the nation. What was the story of his life? His life had terrible periods in it, but his attitude didn't. He had terribly unjust things happen to him, but he never wavered in his belief in God. He had reason to be angry, but he always did the best he could at where he was at. What is your struggle today? Each of us have to learn to make decisions that are consistent with our story. If you lived a high integrity life, you have to continue living a high integrity. If your life has been a little wobbly, from this point on, you have to switch over and make decisions the way God has taught us to make so he can work in our life. You tracking with me? And so if it's been a mess till now is the time to straighten it out and make decisions which become part of your story, which will demonstrate God working in your life. So going forward, our lesson is circumstances don't affect your relationship to God or your happiness or your peace. How you respond to the circumstances reflect on everything. 10% what happens, 90% how you respond to it. And I would say, looking through the life of Joseph, I don't know how he remained sweet in his spirit. But what's our lesson? Remain sweet in our spirit and close to God. Circumstances come and go, but your attitude and your spirit has to be consistent. So this is why this is important. It's the story that you live that affects your kids and your grandkids, not the story you tell. Each of us has a personal walk with God. Each of us can live a life of high integrity that honors God. And that is what our kids are looking for. You know, I'm done, by the way. You can relax, go to sleep now. But as your kids get older, they get hair-curlingly honest. And they're not afraid of you. They'll tell you anything. And you need to have lived a high-integrity life because they were watching. They were watching. And they can recount things in my life. Is one of my kids going to be 40? Oh my goodness. That's from Linda's first marriage. I'm too young. They can go back 20 years and more incidences in your life. So followers of Jesus Christ, our life has to be lived with a knowledge that our story is being written. And it has to be high integrity and God honoring. Amen. Would you stand with me?